Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Vissa. Today we have Dr. Carl Safina on the show. He is the founding president of the Safina Center. He is the inaugural holder of the Carl Safina Endowed Chair for Nature and Humanity at Stony Brook University and host of the PBS series Saving the Ocean with Carl Safina. He's also a #1 best-selling author, maybe even New York Times best-selling author of Beyond Words, What Animals Think and Feel, and also the author of the new book, ALFIE and Me, What Owls Know, What Humans Believe. Dr. Carl Safina, thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home Show.
Thanks very much. I am working from home right now.
That's great. Well, just walk us through your background beyond what I just stated and how you've become a leader in what I would call eco trends.
I'm glad you think I'm a leader. That's good.
You got your own show on PBS, so you got to be a leader.
Well, I'll take that. I always really was absolutely fascinated by animals from the time I was a little boy. I don't know exactly why, but I was. And I did not live in a wild place. I lived in a city in Brooklyn, New York, until I was 10 years old. And maybe because I lived there, animals were very exotic to me. There weren't anything that was, around all the time. But my father's hobby was raising canaries. So we always had birds in our apartment. And that's unusual. I did a lot of things, as much as I could really, to get involved with animals when I was a little kid. I raised homing pigeons. I got into falconry. I did a lot of fishing and camping when I was a teenager. And most of that stuff I figured out how to do on my own, I would say. And I wanted to do something that had to do with helping wildlife, helping animals, something with conservation, being outside, not in an office at a desk. I had no idea how you do that. I thought it was more or less impossible. But then I found out, just by accident, I had really no good guidance at all, but I found out that you could go to college. In college, you could major in environmental studies. And then there was such a thing as graduate school where you could learn more. The great value of graduate school was I started to meet people who could really help me at that point. And to make a longer story a little bit shorter, I did eventually start to get work and jobs having to do with conservation, taking care of animals and things like that. I also always did a lot of fishing. The fishing was showing me that there were fewer fish every year. And this is when I was maybe in my, let's say I was around 30 by that time. And well, actually late 20s, 30, I could see that there were fewer fish every year. And I looked deeply into that. This was before we had the internet or Google or anything, where you had to go to libraries and look things up and have books open all over the table and write to agencies for reports. And I started to realize that the ocean was being depleted, not only on our coast, but globally. And I got very vocal about that. I started writing some things about that for a local fishing newspaper. I started very, very small. And eventually I began to get more involved with groups, with conservation groups, people who were well connected, understood how processes worked, how you get laws changed, how the United Nations creates policies. I got very, very involved with all of that stuff by the time I was about 35 and 40 years old. And then I continued writing, but I wrote a book, a first book. I've written now, I think, 13 books, but I wrote a first book, and that was about how the world's oceans were being depleted and how that was affecting people of the coasts and wildlife of the oceans. And that gave me, of course, a much bigger platform where a lot more people, got ideas and information I was trying to share, which, the books get me invited to do a lot of speaking in front of a lot more people, exactly like I'm doing here with you now. So I guess that's a quick run through.
Let's talk a little bit more about your work process and your work in general. So let's first start with how we, the people, you clearly care about the environment, you care about the waters, about the fish and animals. What changes can people actually make to let the world survive and its population, whether it's humans or animals, thrive?
I think that most fundamentally, we have a problem of valuation. We are really taught that the physical world and the living world that's part of it really don't matter. And we are also taught that instead of thinking my personal greatness comes from how much I do to help my community, and a healthy and thriving community will create better people. Instead of thinking that way, we're taught to compete. We are taught a method of winning that happens when you make someone else lose. I'm referring now to team sports. We think team sports are so great, but what are we taught there? We're taught to win by making others lose. When I was in high school, I didn't like sports, but I loved playing music. And in music, when you're in a group playing music, you win because everybody is contributing to something that cannot happen unless everybody is contributing. And you share that with the other people who are just enjoying it. And that to me was always a much better model than trying to beat another team and trying to make people lose. So I really think that the problems and the solutions are very, very fundamental. I think they're very basic. I think they're really not that complicated at their root. I think it's how we value the world and the people around us. And I think, unfortunately, we're taught that the world has very little value, that humans are the only thing that matters, and that we personally matter more than anyone else. And we need to get ahead. We need to win by outcompeting others. And I think that those are the fundamental problems that we have, which really would be easy to solve by just being taught a little differently and thinking and acting a little differently. How can I exist in the world causing the least harm to the world and what lives here? How can I exist by helping other people and helping the community to thrive? I think those are really the fundamental things.
I'm curious, are you vegetarian or vegan?
I live on the coast and I catch a lot of fish. I dig clams. We have 5 hens in our backyard who in fact, I just let them out of their coop right before I got on the call with you. They lay eggs. So I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but I think that our food system is very, very broken. So I don't buy animal products. that from any farmed animals. I don't buy that stuff. If I want to eat fish, I go and catch it. That's my personal relationship with the world and my knowledge of how the world is. And you know, as I said earlier, fishing led me to understand that we were depleting the ocean, and that led me to a long period of work, almost 20 years of work, to revise the laws that govern fishing so that we have actually in U.S. waters, we have a lot more fish than we had when I was in my 20s. So that's my give back on that. And we have a greengrocer down the block who does she sells a lot of food that she raises in her own farms that are local, and I like going to her a lot because we have a relationship. We know each other. I understand that my money is going directly to her, and that's my approach to food.
Can you tell me just a little bit more? I just want to know the thought process or the reasoning, because if you'd like to preserve animals and help the environment, at least the research that I've read has shown that the meat industry is probably the largest contributor to carbon emissions or bad carbon emissions. Just tell me a little bit more about why you're not vegan or vegetarian, and
Well,
also,
I don't participate in the meat industry. You know, you can't catch fish if the ocean is broken. That depends on a thriving ocean. And as I said, I think our entire food system is completely broken. If you're eating broccoli, that broccoli is grown on a farm. That farm used to grow butterflies and other things that live there. You know, there's no free lunch. Meat is worse than vegetables, but vegetables are bad. And we really can't get around this problem except by looking to, I think, except by looking to small scale vegetable farmers, people who are not spraying pesticides all over the place and using fertilizers that run off and poison our waters. And that's just vegetable farming. And then as far as meat, you know, I think that in addition to the pollution that is caused by the meat industry, it's just hideously cruel. That's why I avoid those things.
understood. So what you're saying is basically people should catch their own or grow their own, because if you do it more naturally that way, then you're not actually participating in, let's say, the meat industry or the pesticides, which
Yeah,
is
to the extent that one can. I happen to live on the coast. I happen to grow up fishing. I know how to do that. And that's a personal relationship that I have with the ocean, where I need to know things about the ocean in order to go and get some food from it. And if I take a fish out of the ocean, I don't hurt the ability of the ocean to produce another fish. But if I clear land to grow soybeans, then nothing else is going to live there except soybeans. So in a way, that is more damaging and more harmful, more long term. Agriculture is really the thing that is making it almost impossible for animals to live in the world, because agriculture takes their living spaces away. And a lot of that agriculture is for direct human consumption. An awful lot of it is to grow things to feed to pigs and chickens and cows, which is yet another reason why the meat industry is so destructive to life on the planet.
you do a lot of research, obviously, as founding president of the Safina Center, and your books. How do you conduct your research on animals? And when I say how, are you traveling around the world, finding animals? Tell us more about your research process.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that for all of my books, except the one that came out last week or a week and a half ago, I went to some very far-flung places to put the book together. I think my first book, I think I went to 10 countries. I don't think, I think I usually go to somewhere between 3 and 6 countries to go with researchers who have spent a lot of time studying whatever particular creature or system I'm interested in writing about. But after my last book, COVID happened, and all of my travel was completely canceled. Like most people, I had no place to go, but very coincidentally, we had raised an orphaned owl that somebody had rescued on their lawn. And the beginning of that owl's free-flying life coincided with the end of our flying and traveling for the duration of COVID. So having nothing better to do, I sat in my backyard and I watched this owl who very coincidentally, almost magically, decided to stick around our backyard and center her territory there. And she got a wild mate and they raised a family in our backyard. So my most recent book is about this family of owls, and by extension, how people have seen our human place in the world, around the world, and through time. But I did all of this at home, watching the owls for about 5 hours a day, and then, just doing the rest of the research at my desk. So instead of going to 10 countries, I stayed in my backyard.
And where is home again for you? Where are you based?
It's on Long Island, New York.
I just made the assumption that you were like in a rural part of the country now, or do you live on a farm or you're in the heart of Long Island?
I live in the suburbs, but where we are right here, there's kind of a lot of green patches. For instance, my backyard, I have a neighbor right next to me on one side, just like a typical suburban thing. But on the other side, there's a little patch of woods, and behind me, that woods wraps around my backyard. So behind my backyard, there's about 30 acres of woods. Right diagonally across the street, there's a small wetland that runs into a couple of mill ponds that spill into a bay that opens into Long Island Sound. So we're sort of on the edge of the suburbs here and the edge of some green spaces. But, half a mile away, or even less, really, it's just suburban housing, just like an awful lot of places.
Tell us about your new book, because it seems different from your previous books.
Well, it's different in a way, and it's an extension in a way. The last few books, I've been getting more and more oriented toward individual wild animals, not just wild animals as a population or a species, but individuals and the individual histories and individual personalities that exist in lots of species, including a lot of wild animals that we never think of. And most of us never get any opportunity to observe. We know that our dogs and cats have different personalities, but we assume that wild animals don't. And to varying extents, wild animals do. This book is much more personal and much more local, and it's about really one owl and her mate, but it's really one owl that we have this relationship with because we raised her and she knows us very well, and she has remained tame. Now she's 5 years old. She has raised a total of 10 young owls with her 2 wild mates that she had. The first mate must have died because he came back 2 years in a row, and then he didn't come back the third year. And then the fourth year, she got a new mate. this kind of thing goes on with lots of animals, owls and lots of animals all the time, but we never get to see what their lives are like. And I got to see what their lives are like in a very unusual level of detail. And it's just been beautiful and really, really, it feels magical, actually.
So, Dr. Safina, are you still hosting the show on PBS?
No, but you can still watch it on PBS because it's up on the website. It's called Saving the Ocean with Carl Safina, and there are 10 episodes. They're available to anybody or available to classrooms for free, but we're not doing any more of them. The series ended.
And you run the Safina Center. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, my work, I am trained as an ecologist. Ecological science is my formal background, but I know that a more important thing than going out and counting and measuring what's out there alive, plants and animals, the more important thing is to help people see that that life is really a miraculous thing. We live on a miraculous planet, and that we are almost totally ignorant to what is living around us, and that we really need to observe, just open our eyes. When we do open our eyes, I think it opens our hearts, and we realize how deeply we can care about life on this planet and the life right around us. And that's an emotional thing. That is not a science thing. It's informed by science, but it's mostly emotional. So at the Safina Center, we have a group of fellows who are like-mindedly, they work from a fact basis, but they are trying to help people open their eyes and open their hearts to the tremendous beauty of the living world and to the tremendous tragedy of what we are doing to it.
Dr. Safina, this is Carl Safina. Thank you so much for joining us on the Work From Home show. The website is safinacenter.org. That's SAFINA center.org, as well as carlsafina.org. That's Carl with a C, carlsafina.org. Dr. Safina, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
Well, I think, I guess the only thing I would say is that nature and life is all around us. It's not in a place like you don't just go to Yellowstone or hope someday to take a safari to see nature. You can walk right out the door. Where I live here, for instance, we have about 300 species of birds that cross Long Island or nest on Long Island during the year. And this is true of almost anywhere. There's, the world is the world, and we're in it, and it's a miracle. So get out, enjoy, open your heart.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carl Safina. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Get on our mailing list there. Follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook. It's now called X, Facebook. A few other social media. Just type in Work From Home Show. You'll find us. If you have any questions about this interview or about our show, or about if you want us to relay anything to Dr. Safina, hit us up, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next week, keep on working from home.